Hey everybody, welcome to Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. We are coming to you courtesy of our broadcasting partner, moretalk.tv. This week on the show, I'm honored to welcome Dr. Mary Helen Hensley. Dr. Hensley is a chiropractor, metaphysical healer, and an international motivational speaker. She has authored numerous books, including The Pocket Coach and The Chakra Fairies, a Magical Mantra for Children. Her latest bestseller, Promised by Heaven, shares the unforgettable account of her spiritual journey and development as a metaphysical healer. She currently lives in Ireland with her two daughters, Gemma Skye and Jada, who are also gifted outside of their five senses. Her website is maryhelenhensley.com, and she is a featured presenter at the upcoming A.R.E.'s annual Reincarnation and Soul Life Conference, Our Journey Back to God, Reincarnation, Life After Life, and the Continuity of the Soul. And this is as always in Virginia Beach, and this conference takes place from May 13th through the 15th of 2016. That's this year. Mary, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce.
I am so excited to be here, and I'm very excited about what we're getting ready to talk about.
Excellent. And so our listeners, we gave them a little bit about your bio and your background information in the intro to the show. You have a background as a chiropractor and a metaphysical healer, but I'm curious for our Cayce enthusiast out there, how did you first come across the Cayce material and the Association for Research and Enlightenment?
I have a very interesting Cayce association that started a lot earlier than me. It actually started with my grandfather, Dr. Garland Clark, who was also quite gifted in that he had healing abilities from the time he was quite small and then grew up to become a surgeon in Kentucky. And when he was about 15 years old, he went over to Lexington, Kentucky to meet this guy that he'd heard about. And obviously there weren't that many people around for him to talk to about the strange things that had been happening to him. So he goes over to hear this guy speak in Lexington and ended up talking to him afterwards about the abilities that he was beginning to experience. And that man was Edgar Cayce. And later on then, when my grandfather became a doctor, he actually, we found out, did some consulting work with Cayce when he was in Virginia Beach. And my grandfather would regularly visit Virginia Beach. So my Cayce ties go way back. And then I discovered him on my own later on after my car accident in 1991. And when I went on to chiropractic school, I began to hear tale of Cayce in my own way. And long story short, through a series of wonderful divine events, I ended up meeting a fellow who had worked at the massage school. He was head of the massage school a good 20-something years ago, Gary Blauert. And we met in the Cayce library when I was in there doing some research for a book, and we became fast friends. And Gary's very responsible for introducing me to the Egypt group, the prayer group, and I developed my own little family there, and over time have been doing some speaking there. And I did my book launch there in the fall of last year for my book Promised by Heaven, and it's just it's kind of like a homecoming. So I have a very sweet and dear association with the A.R.E.
Absolutely, that's awesome. Wow, the roots run deep. That's beautiful. And you mentioned your latest book. You had your release party at the A.R.E. It's titled Promised by Heaven, as you said. And in this book, you share your personal account of your spiritual journey and the development of what it was like developing as a healer. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how this book came about and what it means to you to finally have it out there?
Well, the book initially came in three parts. I started, I guess, in about 2006 with I had been putting pieces together for the first book, which was called Promised, and I had written the vast majority of it. And I went to a little spiritual center here right in the center of Ireland called Clonmacnoise, and Neil Donald Walsh had come over to do a very intimate sitting. He loves this area. And I was so excited to meet someone of his caliber in this little region, near my small town. And I got the chance to spend some time with Neil and go through the ideas that I had in my book. And it was very funny. We were on our way to this little pub in the country to listen to some Irish music and, to share in the ambiance of Ireland. And I got to take Neil in my car. And so it was just the two of us. And I pitched the idea and I was telling him things. And in about 20 minutes, he had my entire book turned around, rewritten, reformatted. And what he did worked. What he suggested worked. And so I went back, finished the book straight away, had my first book launch here for Promised. And then Promised turned into the next book, Circles of Light, which turned into the next book, The Land Beyond the River. And through, again, another series of very fortuitous events, a very dear friend of mine who is a best-selling author here in Ireland, Patricia Scanlon, who's a deeply spiritual lady. She writes popular fiction, and it's her way of reaching the masses. And she had gotten her hands on my books and sent them off to Simon and Schuster, and who are her publishers. And they took the books, and those 3 books were then rewritten into Promised by Heaven, which is the book that we have out now.
Wonderful. And what has the response been like? What has it been for you to have that book out there?
It's been so wonderful. I think one of the things about my book is that I'm anybody that knows me knows I'm very honest and very candid about the experiences, good, bad, and different, that have happened in my life, because I think they're all equally important. I don't like to just highlight the good things that have happened. I talk about things, injury, illness, rape, you name it. It's cancer. It's been in there. And those are equally as part of my story as the wonderful, exciting, fantastic things that have happened to me. And part of what I do in my writing is I try to get people to let themselves off the hook. I try to get people to understand that, it's the entire journey, not just the good bits. It's not the fairy tale. It's all of the things that make us who we are. And in sharing those things with people, I have found that the responses have been one of literally people letting themselves off the hook. Their gratitude comes from, hey, if you're where you are now and you're sharing this message and these things happen to you, those same things happen to me. So maybe I can find some value in my own journey. And it's been incredible because the responses from the people have been so heartwarming and endearing and truthful. It's like people are returning to their honest selves again, that need to keep up with the Joneses and the need to keep up appearances for this perfect life. I'm celebrating the imperfections, probably even a little more than the perfections, and trying to get other people to join that party so that they know it's okay, that all of those things matter.
Absolutely. Wow. What a wonderful message. Thank you. And I'm curious, Mary, were you born and raised in Virginia?
I was. I was born in Roanoke, Virginia.
And so I'm curious, how did your journey bring you to Ireland? What was that resonance and that draw that always pulled you there?
It's Roanoke was where I was born, and then my father was from Martinsville. My mother, again, was from Kentucky. And they moved back to Martinsville when I was about 6 months old. So I grew up in Martinsville, Virginia, and I went to college in South Carolina at Coker College in Hartsville, and then I did chiropractic school in Spartanburg at Sherman College of Chiropractic, and then after that, I had a brief stay in Philadelphia, and then I moved to Ireland. So I've been in Ireland since 1998.
Wonderful. And what has that been like culturally for you? What was that draw that brought you to Ireland, and what has it been like for you developing as a healer in Ireland?
Well, it was a must. It was I laugh and tell people that where I am in Ireland was definitely a calling. It's like being a missionary, and no, it's absolutely fantastic. It's very different than how I grew up in some respects, and in some respects, it's very similar. The fast-paced aspect of life we definitely don't have here. I mean, it's definitely changed over the years that I've been here. But that urgency that I felt growing up in America, and that urgency to succeed, and the urgency to produce at a high level, the competition aspect, that just doesn't exist here. People just are, they still take lunch off, and, we close it at 6 o'clock, and that's it. Everybody goes home, and, there's no 24-hour Walmart. There's no 24-hour anything really. And, you find that you get on just fine without it. That the culture here still very much allows for personal time and personal space and family time. And I loved that. So that really appealed to me here. Spiritually, the nature of the history here, the ancient Celts, the pagan history, the worship of nature, the understanding of the divinity of themselves. People think of Ireland and they think Catholicism immediately, but that's actually quite new here. The real deep roots of what are here, what's here in Ireland, that's still very evident, and still very much so practiced by a large number of people. And even the people who are practicing Catholic still have that deep connection to their roots and their history and a great appreciation for it. So for me, it was kind of a no-brainer when I got here. It was where I had to be. I got over here chasing ancient symbols. Everybody always thinks I came over here for a husband or a man, and oh, you must have married an Irishman. No, I don't even think I've ever dated one. I got here because I was chasing these symbols that had been appearing in my vision my final year of chiropractic school, and many of them turned out to be ancient Celtic symbols, and the alphabet in and of itself ended up being an alphabet called Goet, which is pre-Atlantean. So it has been a wild ride. But when people are like, "Why did you come to Ireland?" I nearly want to go read the book because it's
That's
such
great.
a
And I think you
long
touched a lot on
story.
something I was going to ask you, but you pretty much hit it on the head, is how Europe seems to have a very rich history of metaphysics, and interests in the practices. And I'm sure, as you've shown, it seems to be a very rich and alive culture today that's still thriving in Ireland.
It is very much so. And I tell you another thing about Ireland, and I guarantee you that Neil Donald Walsh would say the same thing to you, and I think it's why he enjoyed coming here. In Ireland, folks are just folks. It doesn't matter. You can walk down the street in Dublin and Bono might walk past you, or I remember walking past some of the guys from ABBA. You see celebrities all around, but nobody treats them that way. Folks are just folks here. They're very you never know who you're going to run into in a pub somewhere, or, walking along the wild Atlantic coastway. But they're not interested in that. They're interested in the people, and they're interested in the story, but the celebrity of it is kind of non-existent. If you've got a story to tell and a message to share, people will listen because of the message and the story, not because of who you are. And I love that. I think that's what it's all about. And I think we need to get more back to that. We don't need any more gurus in this world. What we need is a group of collectively conscious people who are coming together and realizing that we're all divine, every one of us, nobody more special than the other, that we're all special.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Now, Mary, what I like about your life story, your journey, is that it parallels Casey in ways. And one way I found is that Casey's life's work he found it was to be accomplished while keeping residence at Virginia Beach. And it seems like you have a little parallel in that you wanted to hang your tile out in Ireland. That was something that you were resonating with. So how important was it for you to set up your shop? And what was the difficulties of being a woman raised in Virginia and then, completely relocating yourself and starting your business, and then, of course, also raising your family there?
It was, I don't know that it was any more or less challenging than it would have been if I had done it in the States. That was more personal. What I needed to get away from, like I said before, that kind of hectic rat race, competitive thing that we all kind of grow up. It's also what makes Americans great. We're very ingenious, and we're creative, and we're very self-confident in comparison to a lot of cultures in the world. But with that comes an expectation to constantly produce. And I really needed to, I would definitely have been a bit of an overachiever at that time in my life. And I needed to pull my own plug. I needed to get real with myself. And because this was a big responsibility. I knew what I was taking on. it was funny enough, my grandfather, who's been dead since I was 1, by the way, but has communicated regularly with me. And it was he, the surgeon, who told me I needed to go to chiropractic school because of the metaphysical nature of it, because it encompassed mind, body, and spirit. That's what he wanted me to learn. He wanted me to learn the human body and the anatomy in the quickest and most efficient way that would allow me an understanding of the whole person. So I was able to do that there, and just so grateful for that education. But then, unfortunately, in America, chiropractic is very wrapped up, as most practices are, in the whole insurance thing. And, a lot of people really struggle with being able to make a living and keeping that their moral ethics intact because of the sheer pressure of it. And so, I abandoned ship. I got out and came here where, people walk in here, they get adjusted, they hand over the money for the adjustment and they leave. There's none of this corporate stuff, paperwork and insurance. And I needed that to remain pure. I needed that to keep focused. And so while I built myself up and built my practice up, I was seeing the people for the people. I was seeing the people for what they were bringing to me and what I could bring to them. And it wasn't about money, and it wasn't about competing with the next guy. I'm the only chiropractor for about an hour around. And I got to really focus in and hone on my own gifts because I made a commitment that I wanted to serve humanity. I signed up for the stewardship slot. And I had to put myself in a position where I wouldn't compromise myself just with the sheer temptation of the rat race. And so coming here in that respect was magnificent for me. It made things a lot easier for me. And the time came when the lines became so blurry between what I was offering with chiropractic and what was happening with metaphysics that I had to stop practicing chiropractic and go full-time into metaphysics. Because, if someone's coming to the office to get an adjustment and all of a sudden their dead grandmother's standing in the corner and has a message for them, and I'm like, could you come back on next Tuesday? I only do that on Tuesdays. It became a bit awkward. And so I made the leap and went into full-time metaphysics a good few years ago. And I'll still come back in and dabble in the practice because I love it, and I love seeing the people and the patients. But I consider it, from the background in which I was raised, essential to me being able to develop my skills as an intuitive healer, as a metaphysician. But funny enough, it's come full circle. And now every time I go home, I land in Virginia Beach. So you can't outrun the plan, and I have no intention of doing that. I came here to learn and to grow, and the time will come in the future where I'll probably end up back there again.
Yeah, absolutely. It usually does, always going in cycles. And I love the whole Roanoke, kind of Bedford area is one of my favorite parts of Virginia that I got to explore. So you came from a very beautiful area, that's for sure.
Absolutely beautiful.
Mary, I want to talk a little bit about your approach to your practice as far as a speaker. You are known as a synergistic, motivational speaker. And what does this idea of being a synergistic speaker mean to you, and also what makes your approach unique from other speakers out there?
A synergistic speaker, for me, it means that I have no interest in getting up and doing a monologue for an hour. I want to engage. I'm doing this for the people, so I want to hear from the people. I want to talk to the people. Probably the greatest compliment I've ever received as an author is when people will send me a message and say, gosh, I felt like I was talking directly to you when I was reading your book. And I'm like, mission accomplished. And I think sometimes, it can be very captivating and mesmerizing when you've got, a very charismatic speaker who's up there and telling the tale and enrapturing the audience with fantastic stories. But I'm just as interested in other people's input and stories. And so a synergistic speaker is one who will encourage an exchange between the speaker and the audience. The general rule of thumb is that the speaker gives their talk, and then we don't want to be disruptive, and then there's questions and answers at the end. I always try to kind of jump that boundary and get people to engage. If they want to talk about something on the spot, let's do it. I had a professor in chiropractic school, Dr. David Koch, who actually taught me that skill. And it was the most valuable thing I think I ever learned as a speaker, because we as students used to think, oh, we're getting him off track, and now, we're talking about other stuff that's far more interesting than what he was trying to teach us. When in the end, he knew that we were actually learning more from what we thought we had diverted to. And as a speaker, I think it's interesting because people will come up with stuff that they're thinking about that probably the next guy is thinking about, or that I might have even been thinking about and hadn't gotten to yet. And so they'll throw things out there, and it just changes the whole tone of the conversation. And as my dear friend and manager in Virginia Beach, Gary Blowert, will tell you, it unnerves people who are very organized, that I also step up to a podium and I never have notes. I am I don't know how you'd call it. Half the time you might say it's channeling the information. I get tickled watching myself on video because my eyes will turn up to the corner, and I know when I'm looking at that I'm actually hearing something and then repeating it. Other people might not realize that, but that it's very free flowing and in the moment because you're literally connecting with that particular audience. And that audience isn't going to be the same audience you had the night before or 2 weeks before. And I have a hard time delivering that same talk. Now, I could have a format of things that I'd like to cover, but the synergistic aspect of it is that you're actually going with that flow in the moment. And it takes a big leap for somebody if they're not comfortable speaking in front of groups. But for me, that's not an issue. I have no problem. I'll be sitting in the back of the auditorium at the A.R.E, and I'll turn to my mom and I'll go, I wonder what I'm going to talk about. This is right as they're speaking my name to come up to the stage. And my mother will just crack up because my father was a professional speaker and he would pore over his notes. And he was very regimented that way. I am the polar opposite.
I like that. That's refreshing to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Mary, so we've talked about you as a speaker, so naturally I want to dive a little bit into your upcoming presentation at the upcoming conference here at the A.R.E, and this one is entitled, it's A.R.E.'s annual Reincarnation, and Soul Life Conference, Our Journey Back to God, Reincarnation, Life After Life, and the Continuity of the Soul. That's the theme for this year. It takes place, like I said, in Virginia Beach from May 13th through the 15th, and we'll give our listeners all the information they need to register for that. But for our listeners who are interested in, who may be looking to attend this conference, can you give us a little glimpse into what your topic will be covering? I know we talked about the synergistic aspects, so I know they can come to expect to have a very two-way dialogue with you, but what are the topics that will be covered?
There are so many. I have an interesting approach to this particular subject matter because, as I said, my father was a professional speaker, but he was also a minister. So I grew up in a very Southern Baptist, Christian-based background. Went to church every Sunday. My father was the minister. He was also the headmaster at my school. So not only was I the preacher's daughter, I was the principal's daughter. And reincarnation, the concept, I'm not even 100% sure if before I had my car accident at the age of 21, if I even knew what the word meant. And that's the truth, because it would not have been part of our concept. It wouldn't have fit in our box whatsoever. It would not have been something I'd ever been taught. I certainly never heard it in Sunday school. So it was just a completely unfamiliar topic to me. Now, interesting enough, my grandfather, who would appear to me all throughout my life from the time I was very small, he was showing me that concept, but I didn't understand that was a name or that was something that we separated or compartmentalized as something different than the ordinary. So reincarnation for me was really something I learned on December 14th, 1991. And this was when I was hit by a car at 75 miles per hour in Charleston, South Carolina. And I was turning onto a major highway. And all of a sudden, before this car struck my car, everything slowed down. And I remember being in the position of going, oh, I'm getting ready to die. There was no fear attached to it. There was no expectation. It was just like, oh, I've been here before. And then suddenly I went, oh, I've done this before. And the concept of reincarnation became my reality. So as I exited my body and became an observer of the accident, and I watched this car smash into my own, I was keenly aware at that point that I was going through yet another death process. And I was also very acutely aware of the idea that I could experience the death inside of the body and then exit, or I could exit and watch the death take place. Now, talk about blowing my socks off. This was definitely not something I had ever come across in my church or, with what my parents had taught me to believe, but suddenly it was my reality. So I had to recreate my entire perception of the world following this accident because the idea of having lived before was now very much a reality for me. Um, so down the line as a healer, I used to have people, of course, and we all grow. We start in one place and we grow in our abilities. And in the beginning, people used to ask me, "Oh, do you ever deal with past life stuff?" And I was like, not really. I used to even do this thing where I'd go, you know, in the grand scheme of things in somebody's life, it might be this much. Nowadays, it's this much. Um, and as I've grown and the caliber of people or experiences that have been sent my way for me to help facilitate the healing process, so much of that is wrapped up into past life experiences, or the reality of it for me are parallel life experiences. I don't believe in a string line of a continuum of lifetimes. I believe in parallel existences, and have so many things that have proven that to me. But for all intents and purposes, we'll call it past life. So the idea that things that took place in a previous existence could have effect on the lifetime that somebody's leading now, it's so real to me that I can't even question, whether it's a real thing or not. And everybody that comes across my path and we get into a past life experience with them, they walk out of here going, "Oh my God, I never realized," because it makes such a major shift in their own perception about how they're living their lives currently. So, my perception on reincarnation, past life experience is very much so tied into my experiences in this lifetime. And I'm actually really grateful that the first part of my life didn't include that, because it really validated it for me. It made it so real. It wasn't something I read in a book. It wasn't something that some guru taught me. It wasn't something that was just a natural part of my life growing up. I had to learn it firsthand. And by learning it and incorporating it into my life firsthand, it became my reality. And in owning it like that, it's a lot easier to explain and teach that concept to someone when they know you've experienced it, when they know you own it, rather than having studied it or read it somewhere.
Absolutely. I love that. It's a good message. Mary, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit here while we still have some time. Your role as a mother is such an essential part of who you are, and you make that known within your practice. And I think that's so respectable. But I'm curious, what has your role as being a mother, how has that played on your professional practice as a healer? And also, kind of vice versa, how has your experience as a healer played into your role as a mother as well?
That might be one to ask my children. Interesting. It's not just the role as a mother. It's been the role as a single parent too, because I've been parenting my two girls on their own since they were 1 and 3, and they are now 11 and 13. And, it's funny. I was thinking about that on the way over here. I have to make time for me to achieve my goals and my dreams. I love my children to the moon and back, and they know that. But I am not someone who put myself on the back burner as well. I thought that we could do this together, and we have. So from the time those little girls were very small, I'd throw them in a backpack, and they've been everywhere all around the world with me. And what great life experiences for them. Now, they might have a different concept of that, but for me, I didn't ever see having children as a hindrance to what I was doing. They've been an addition to, and I love a good challenge. And I also like to be very busy. So that works for me because I'm constantly moving from the next spot to the next spot. And, the girls are at dance practice right now, and I had to run up to make sure they had food before I got here. And that's my life. It's balancing the two. And I think one of the most interesting things about what I do is I could be in a room talking to the dead, helping someone lift an affliction, or um, you know, solving some kind of major psychological issue with them based on their past, or whatever. And then I've got to go and I've got to go clean up the dog poop, and I've got to go do laundry, and I've got to make sure that the lunch boxes are packed. And it creates this fabulous balance for keeping it very real. And it reminds me on a daily basis of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because, you asked me in the beginning about why I actually wrote those books in the first place. They were manuals for my children, because early on, both of my girls showed signs of having, their own gift, which tends to run in the family. Mine was enhanced by the car accident, but the ability to see things before they happen, to speak to the dead, that was there before I had the accident. The healing aspect came after the accident. My grandfather and his healing abilities, that's kind of the line that this comes from. And so when I started seeing these things and listening to my girls talk about past lives and listening to them talk about things that most other little kids weren't talking about, I figured that I had to kind of do it blindly, because, with my parents being into what they were, Christianity, definitely following the teachings of Christ and the Bible, all the answers that I needed and the answers that they needed, they didn't have for me. And I kind of had to find that myself. And I wanted my children to have my story, and I wanted them to see that it was okay to be different, and that it was, that we were weird, yes, but fantastically weird, and that the weirdness and the strange abilities that we had were something that we could turn around and help other people with. And wasn't that a magnificent gift? So I started writing these books so that the girls could find themselves in me. They could see their own story in mine and not feel isolated. Luckily, I was the type of personality that was able to handle that as a child, but it was lonely sometimes, because I really didn't have anybody but my grandfather, who was not with us, to talk to about it. And, my parents would do that nervous laugh when I'd share the next story. Okay. And it was real for them because it was in their face and they knew it was happening, but they didn't have any answers for me. So very much so I had to find that in and of myself. And I wanted my girls to be able to talk freely about it, and to know that it was perfectly okay, that it was a blessing and it was part of our path and what we chose to come here to do, to serve. Now, my 13-year-old is a typical teenager and thinks that I am just the height of weirdness right now. But what's really interesting is all of her little pals, most of their friends' parents have read the books and they know what I do for a living and they find it fascinating. So she's kind of standing out there on her own going, my mom's a weirdo. And they're going, it's so cool. So it's this kind of whole reverse psychology thing going on. And it's so interesting. And it's really fun to watch. And it's fun watching them blossom and develop and seeing that innate need to nurture other people, and helping them develop that, and helping them utilize these God-given talents that they've been blessed with to assist other people and assist themselves on the journey as well. So, it's wonderful. I love being a mother. I love getting a babysitter and going out and doing other things too.
I like that. It's a good way of looking at it. Wonderful. That's a very inspiring messages for any parents who are out there listening. As a mother, I think you've shown that it is very, very important to cultivate your child's latent talents and abilities, and for you to recognize that and to cultivate that. I think that's a really inspiring message for all parents out there. And it plays hand in hand with what Casey said, how there's generations to come of young adults and children. I think especially at the time we're living in now, is that you're going to find that they have an incredible gift built into them, an intuitive ability. And it's really important as parents to cultivate that, as I'm sure you've experienced with your own children, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. And the challenge for them, I mean, it's far different than when you and I grew up. It's if we didn't get invited somewhere on a Friday night, we went home, we cried about it, and that was the end of it. These guys live in an age of technology where they're reinforced and they have to watch pictures or see stories on Snapchat, and right. They're dealing with much headier stuff than we did growing up. And
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
what's interesting about it is there's an anger and an angst that comes with it. And, unfortunately, it gets diagnosed as different disorders or ADDs and, all of this stuff where the kids aren't okay because they're not fitting in or not conforming. And I'm going, guys, this anger is necessary because this is the generation coming up that creates massive change. As we all know, I mean,
Absolutely.
look at the things that Casey prophesied. It's all happening. And these kids coming in are the army. They're the army of light. And if they're not angry and ticked off about what's going on in the world, then we're not going to get anywhere. And so that internal struggle that they're feeling and that need to lash out. And I hear so many parents say, oh my God, if I ever talk to my parents the way my kids talk to me, that's because they're not going to just swallow down what we feed them. They've got to question it. They've got to find themselves in it. And they also have these incredible truth meters. You can't BS these kids. And
Sure.
isn't that a wonderful thing? Because good Lord, have a look at the front page of the newspaper. We need some people to be coming in and calling BS on what's going on in the world. And I
Absolutely.
want to play my part in fostering that. I don't want to punish or take away from the fact that my child is angry at the state of the world. She should be. This is the world that she's got to grow up in and she's got to raise a family in. And if she's not upset about the condition that it's in, then who's going to be? So I have to give her the freedom and the space to do that. And I can't go, oh, I failed as a parent, or, oh, this she must not be happy because of this. She's not supposed to be 100% happy with the way things are right now, or else we don't see the change that is crucial to our survival as a species.
I love that. Thank you for saying that. Not enough people are willing to say that. So thank you so much for sharing that message. Um, I'm curious, what has you most? We've talked a lot about the uniqueness of this time, but what has you most inspired, and also what has your daughters most inspired as you look around at what's going on, both personally in your life and then professionally and the larger scale, what's going on with this kind of movement towards being more conscious, being fed up with, the stuff that's no longer working. What really lights your own fire, your personal fire?
Do you know, Brent, what's interesting, and this goes back to kind of why I came to Ireland. And of course, like I said, there's that undertone of spirituality and metaphysics, Gnosticism and the whole pagan thing here. But there are also a lot of people who got kind of caught up in the fly of the Catholic thing, and there's a lot of guilt that comes with that. It's a religion that is based on guilt. I'm sorry, I'll say it out loud. And I get tickled because I said I moved to Ireland because I'd never be out of work. There are that many people who need help getting themselves off the hook because guilt alone has dictated every move they've made in their life. But that was important for me. It's like sharpening your claws. It's like getting your teeth sunk in and learning. That really inspires me, getting people to move out of the guilt phase, or that they messed up, or that they should have or could have. I can't stand those words. I should have done this or I could have done this. I'm like, what are you doing now? Where are you presently? And
Yeah.
moving them out of making excuses, to be honest. People make excuses for not being excellent based on phantoms of the past. And if that's where my passion is, that's where my passion is. I like pulling people. I could say it in a much more colorful way, but pulling people's head out of the sand and bringing them back into present time, and letting them know that those things that happened to them have enriched their experiences. It has, that they're meeting their own demands on a soul level, that the individual soul that they are came here for the challenges. I try to take people back into that space of remembering their own divinity, the apotheosis, that man is actually divine, and that divine creature came here and chose a series of very difficult circumstances in this lifetime in order to grow, to learn, to move forward, and to enhance the forward momentum of planet Earth in and of itself. It's an interesting place. I always believe that Earth is, it's a place of dark and light. It's the dichotomy, the ultimate dichotomy of dark and light. It's not all supposed to be good here. But somehow, somewhere along the way, something convinced us that everything was supposed to be good. And then if it wasn't, we failed somehow.
Yeah.
So really, my big passion, my mission is getting people out of that mindset and going, can you not appreciate what happened to you that was, when you were a child, as much as you can appreciate the good things that are happening to you as an adult, because that's where people get stuck. Oh my gosh, I lost all my money. Well, I wrote about that. I lost all my money. I've done that. I was raped. Oh, I was raped. I can talk about that the same as I talk about my porridge that I ate this morning, because it has no energetic attachment. So I'm really constantly trying to take people into the present time and detach, pull the plug on the events that happened in the past. Not that they didn't happen, but that they no longer rob them of the energy in the present time. Because I don't want to erase them or pretend like they didn't happen, because they're valuable, and those were custom ordered by the soul. It's getting people to remember that they custom ordered these experiences, because that veil drops and we get here and we're like, oh, everything's supposed to be great. We're supposed to grow up, fall in love, and get married and have children and have our house and our dogs, and everything gets great, and we die of old age. And if we didn't achieve that, then somehow we failed as human beings. So I'm kind of a crusader for that, and trying to get people to understand what they're really here for, and for God's sakes to take risk. I'm the queen of taking risks. It's probably a side effect of having been dead, of having gone through that beautiful process of looking back and going, oh my Lord, I'm going in there and I am going to use up every drop of energy I have, and I'm going to be just wasted by the time that death comes around again. I'm going to be exhausted. I don't want to look good. I don't want to be no wrinkles. I don't want to, be unscathed by life. I want to be used up. And so I'm constantly encouraging people, please go out and take risks. That's what you're here for. Stop thinking that you're here for everything to work out okay, because half of the fun is getting yourself out of those precarious situations.
Absolutely. Wow. Very inspiring message. Thank you, Mary. And my final question, you really just answered it right there. I was going to ask you for our listeners who, is a theme today has been talking about the uniqueness of our time, and really how difficult, but also how incredibly, how much incredible potential exists at this time. So I was going to ask you, for our listeners who are struggling with their day-to-day, what advice would you give them from where to start right now? What advice would you give them? And you really covered that, but is there anything else you could add for our listeners who are really just struggling to find their way right now?
Yeah, you know what? Fear is a choice. And fear is quite honestly, when people talk about they're struggling and they're having a difficult time, it's all fear. They're fearful of not having enough, not being enough, of, oh, what way is the world going to be for my children? I mean, that's been every generation since the dawn of time. And the shoe, we have this terrible syndrome of always waiting for the shoe to drop. And you know what? The freaking shoe hasn't dropped, because it's not going to drop, because the world is perfectly perfect the way that it is. This dichotomy of dark and light that I spoke of, it presents us with the most beautiful, beautiful things that one could ever imagine, and the most horrendous and horrific things that human beings are capable of doing. And that's what Earth School has to offer. Do you know? It's that dichotomy of dark and light. It's the opportunity to see that duality, and see that duality is really a farce, and that it's a schoolhouse in which to learn. It's like taking a college course. But unfortunately, people get stuck in that mindset, and they believe the duality, and they believe that, that dark and light are bad. Light is good, dark is bad. When I'm going, it's all good. It's all there for your own growth. It's what you choose to do with it. So I think what messes most people up is the fear. It's the fear that somehow they weren't going to be enough. That they weren't going to have enough. Ask Neil Donald Walsh, who will be speaking at this conference with me. He was homeless at one point. For me, I lost everything I had when my children's father left Ireland, and I had to start all over again with 2 babies. I wouldn't change that for the world. And people might think I'm mad for saying that. I wouldn't change it for the world. The idea of being able to look back now and utilizing those stories to hand to somebody else and to help them get out of the hole, that brings me more joy than the idea of never having experienced that. So it's dropping the fear. It's getting rid of the idea that you're not good enough, because you already are. We already are that which we seek. That's kind of the big message of the whole thing. And the idea of reincarnation and people attending seminars and conferences and workshops, really, a lot of people will be there because they're afraid, and they want to hear a message that life does go on, that when it ends, there's something else out there, and they need that validation because they're afraid. But part of the idea of being here is working through that fear. And when you make the choice to drop the fear and just live a day without it, and to see how incredible and how creative you can be when every action, every move that you make isn't dictated by fear, that's when people actually move into their true power.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. What an inspiring message. And thank you so much for giving us your time today and for sharing all your incredible wisdom. And I can't thank you enough for being a part of the A.R.E family. And we really, really look forward to having you in May.
I can't wait to get there, and I'm bringing my mother with me, and I get to see all of my friends. And for me, it's a homecoming, and
Absolutely.
The A.R.E is such a special part of my life. The teachings of Casey, again, that man never wanted to be a guru. He just wanted to get in there, get his hands dirty, and work, and he wanted to serve, and that very much so inspires me.
It's up to us to continue.
I love the teachings and the work so much because that's who he was. He was just a regular guy who had an extraordinary ability, and he loved helping humanity.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for being a part of the A.R.E family, and thank you so much for giving us time today and being on the show with us.
Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you in May.
Excellent. Take care. Don't miss your chance to see Mary in person, as she is a feature presenter at the upcoming A.R.E annual Reincarnation and Soul Life Conference from May 13th through the 15th of 2016. To register, you can visit our website, as always, at edgarcasey.org/conferences. On behalf of everyone here at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and of course MoreTalk.tv, I thank you so much for tuning into our program, Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. Hope everyone takes time this week to slow down, relax, and show yourself some much needed love and attention. Hope everyone has a wonderful week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Much love. And now it's time for the thought for the day today here on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. And joining me in the thought for the day today is Dr. Bill Austin. Bill, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Oh, it's great to be here, Brent. Thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure. Good to have you. And if you can go ahead and read the excerpt from the Cayce readings that we chose for the thought for the day today.
Thank you. This thought comes from reading 2448-2. Know that what is truly yours cannot be taken away from thee. Know that what is truly yours cannot be taken away from thee. And to me, when I read this, it's like, well, what is truly yours? And I think what's truly ours is the fruits of the Spirit. Peace, joy, happiness, harmony, and when it says it can't be taken away, I'd like to add, but it can be replenished by giving it away. Here's a gift that is always ours, always being replenished. All we need to do is give it away. And the more we give it away, the more we get back of these gifts, these fruits of the Spirit, this peace, this harmony, this joy, this inner satisfaction.
Absolutely. That is a wonderful point. And I love that you pointed out that it's all about giving, and it's about giving away. If you want more, you got to give it away. And the only thing I would add to that's so hits the nail on the head would be the more you give out, when it comes back, it's not just you give out a little bit, you get back a little bit. When you give out, it comes back exponentially for you. So the way I look at that is it's inspiration to give more, to constantly give more, because the more you give, it doesn't just come back in equal parts. From what I've experienced and what I've seen, it comes back exponentially. And it's really, as you've said in the past, Bill, it's really about intention. If you have the right intention, and your intent's in the right place, and you're coming from a place of strong spiritual ideals, considering all who are involved when you make your decisions, you get like you said, the fruits of the Spirit come right back at you. For me personally, I love this one because it's a very powerful one. It's one of those one sentence really hits you, strong, powerful statements from Casey. It's a little esoteric as well too, so it's really open for interpretation, which I like. This one made me think of kind of the tragedies that we see going on around us right now, because we live in a time of turmoil, and there's a lot of changes taking place right now, a lot of old crumbling and new being formed. This makes me think of historical tragedies, and whether it be from man-made tragedies or natural, when you look at the aftermath of a tragedy, you find that so many people have lost their physical possessions, everything they ever owned. But when you look at these people, they're able to pick up and move on, and they're able to find happiness and grow from it and even better their lives. So when we lose all of our physical possessions, what are we left with? We're left with what we have, which is our physical body and our soul, our spirit, that the human spirit. And this is what can never be taken away from us. These are the things that Casey talks about. These are the things also that, science can't measure. So of course we kind of live in a society that doesn't put a lot of emphasis on this, because we can't measure the fruits of the Spirit just yet. We just have to intuitively feel them and see them manifest in our lives. So things like you talked about, Bill, things like patience, hope, faith, compassion, forgiveness, all of these fruits of the spirits, as Casey said, they can never be taken away from us. And he also makes it very clear that these are the things that when we shed our physical body, we take these with us. These are things that are a part of our soul, and they're ingrained, and they will manifest in every lifetime. So I love this one because it's simple, but it's a huge impact, and it's very esoteric. So it's open for so many different things to be pulled from this little bit of wisdom.
Yes, and I like how you brought it back to this material earthly plane. When others are in need of help, I'm seeing more and more people responding to that call. They're giving what they have. On a material aspect, and that material aspect, I think, is only a reflection of that inner aspect. But when you talk about these disasters, and I think about the responses that we're starting to see more and more, to me, it's a reflection of a wonderful spiritual change, or a change in attitude and intent coming from a spiritual origin.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point, Bill. What we see going on in our lifetime right now is a huge shift from a purely material or physical focus to now expanding it towards, or maybe shifting, maybe swinging the pendulum more towards the spiritual focus that we see. So it truly is, as I said before, inspiring to be alive at this time and get to see it manifesting.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well said.
Well, Bill, thank you as always for joining me for the Thought for the Day. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Brent. It's great to be here. Have a salubrious day today.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.